How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to a video on 10 cheap cars that are absolutely soaring in value. Last week I made a video with the exact same title but at £15,000. I said if we got 1,000 likes on that video I would do it at 5,000, and so here we are. All 10 of these cars have been going up in value for quite some time now, and to be honest, all 10 of them look like they could carry on doing so. But as always, don't forget that I'm in the UK, so prices in other countries may differ, and remember that whenever you buy any second-hand car, maintenance, repairs, insurance, road tax, all that good stuff is important to remember. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate a like. Let's see if we can hit 2,000 on this one. That would be crazy. Subscribe as well if you're new, but without further ado, let's get into the video. Let's start this video with the BMW Z3, an appreciating roadster with its 2-litre inline 6 spec, which puts out 150 brake horsepower and does 0 to 60 in 8.6 seconds. You may have seen in my last video on the topic I mentioned the Z4M as a car going up in value as a result of the Z3M's astronomical rise over the past 10 years or so. The Z3 is a cheap access route into owning something remotely similar to the Z3M, and the roadster is beginning to gain traction as a classic car, particularly in its more desirable, wider post-facelift shape. In the last year, 3-litre and 2.8-litre examples have moved from being available for under £5,000 at the lower end to being well over £5,000, and the other engines are following suit. The 2-litre examples have sat at around the £1,500 to £2,000 mark for quite some time at the lower end now, with £5,000 getting you a 1999 facelifted example with 60,000 miles on the clock. At the top end, the best examples are going for upwards of £10,000 to £15,000 in excellent condition. Watch out for tapping from the engine on startup and failing sensors. Thermostats are known to stick open too, and make sure transmission fluid has been changed regularly. The majority of problems I could find though were just wear and tear on the suspension components from use. Next up is a car that people are slowly waking up to, the Mark I Audi TT with its 1.8-litre turbocharged inline-4 engine, putting out 221 brake horsepower, which takes from 0 to 60 in 6.4 seconds. Its bubbly shape has started to grow in popularity over the past few years, and they're starting to gain a more classic status as we speak, with enthusiasts searching for the best examples to store away. There's a line of thinking which suggests that the roadsters will actually be the better option in terms of longer term investment, as there are fewer of them, but they're around as popular as the Coupe. I personally prefer the Coupe, but thought I'd make the point clear for your information. It also comes with a 3.2-litre VR6 engine, but the 1.8T 225 band block is one of the more sought after options, partially because of its wide use throughout VW Group cars. Over the past few years, these have gone from being available for as little as £1,000 to around £2,000 now, with £5,000 getting you a 2004 model with around 70,000 miles on it. Corrosion isn't much of an issue on these, but it can flare up on the roof and sills. Watch out for when the cam belt, tensioner and water pump have been replaced on the 1.8, as it's pretty key, and watch for oil leaks too. Overall, maintenance on these is considered to be relatively cheap, but worth doing your research before you buy. Following on from the sudden growth in value of the VTS, the Citroen Saxo VTR has rapidly become an appreciating classic, which seems so strange in my head as I can remember when these were available for under £1,000. Right now you're looking at £2,000 at the bottom end for a running example, and still pretty high miles at the £5,000 mark. This is due to a number of reasons, but before we get into that, worth noting that this car has a 1.6-litre inline-4 putting out 100 brake horsepower, which gets from 0 to 60 in 9.1 seconds, making it the slowest and least powerful car on this list. The Saxo was basically the same car as the 106, just with a different badge and some body panels and interior parts differing. The VTS gained popularity very quickly as the warm hatch example, and the VTR was basically its slightly colder equivalent. Saxos were known as boy racer style cars for a while and appeared in magazines like Max Power in the earlier days. They also gained popularity in rallying and rallycross, and you can find plenty of converted VTRs on race car classified sites. For all of those reasons, the VTR and VTS have both jumped in value pretty significantly and are becoming harder to find. Corrosion is a key problem on these, and check for crash damage too, as when these were released they came with free insurance. It can be quite hard to find one that hasn't been modified too. Electrics are also known to be an issue, but the car as an overall is pretty cheap to work on apart from the rust. Old performance Renaults have consistently proven to increase in value as people start to appreciate them more with age, and the Renault Clio Renault Sport 172 and 182 are very much in this transitional period. The 182 has a 2-litre inline-4 putting out 182 brake horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of 6.9 seconds, not bad for this little French warm hatch. Both were built on the Clio 2 platform, with the 182 being a refresh of the Phase 2 172. The basics are pretty similar between the two, with some minor tweaks to styling and obviously obviously the engine, giving it that extra 10 horsepower. The first generation Clio in the right specs like the RSI and Williams is already worth a decent bit of money, and as mentioned, the previous Renault 5 Turbo, Turbo 2 and GT Turbo continue to gain in both popularity and value. With the 172 and 182 being the evolution of those cars into the modern era, they have the potential to gain traction at least along the lines of maybe the GT Turbo, and have been slowly creeping up in value over the last few years. £2,500 is around the minimum you'll find running ones listed for, and for £5,000 you're looking at around 80,000 miles on the clock. Trophy editions have recently gone higher than £15,000. The engine is known to be pretty tough as long as it's serviced on time, but one common problem is a rattling inlet cam timing variator, which you should replace alongside the cam belt. There are also some known leaks, worn synchro issues in the transmission, and rust isn't unheard of. In my last video on cars going up in value, I mentioned the Integra DC5 Type R, which is sitting at around £15,000. The EP3 Civic Type R has the exact same platform and engine, but is a third of the price. It has that K20 2-litre inline-4 engine with 197 brake horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of 6.4 seconds, and the lowest you'll find them listed for is around £3,000, and £5,000 to get your 2005 example is still around 100,000 miles on the clock. The previous generation, or EK9 Civic Type R, has already started to increase in value, and the EP3 is slowly starting to follow suit, as it sat at around £2,000 at the lower end this time last year. The JDM examples, or Mugans, are definitely more desirable, but obviously rarer and more expensive, thanks to having LSDs and Recaro race seats, as well as more track-focused chassis overall. The non-JDM examples are popular enough as it is, and the Type R badge in and of itself almost has its own cult following, which helps to make the older examples go up in value, as that popularity doesn't disappear with age. On reliability, the engine is known to be strong as long as the cam chain is changed on time at around 100,000 miles, and as long as the previous owners have given the engine time to warm up before thrashing. Synchros are also known to be sketchy too if the transmission has been harassed. I hope you're enjoying the video. If you are, make sure you hit the like button, I would really appreciate it, and subscribe as well if you're new, and go and follow me on Instagram at carswithjb, where I post every single day. I'm trying to hit 10k over there and I'm struggling, so I need some help. Next up is a car that's been on its way up in price for quite a while now, the Fiat Coupe 20 valve turbo, with its 2-litre turbocharged inline-5 engine putting out 220 brake horsepower, which gets it from 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds. I've noted this car in many previous videos, and as a mixed crisp bangle exterior and Pininfarina interior design, it is known by its iconic shape and Ferrari-style taillights. But more importantly, it's actually a pretty high-performance car, particularly from the Fiat brand, and it's gained its own status as a classic car with many expecting high future values. Though I personally have seen prices stagnate recently, the number available for sale seems to be decreasing, with more and more being sawned or exported every year. There are now almost double the number of Fiat Coupes that have been taken off the road to be stored than there are actually registered on the roads here in the UK. These are only just about available for sub £5,000, with the cheapest examples I could find looking pretty ropey at 3k. At £5,000 you're still looking at well over 100,000 miles on the clock. Rust is known on these, particularly on the sills and floor pans, as well as boots and front wheel arches. The rear placed coolant hose can also fail, so worth checking and potentially replacing for peace of mind. Owners have been quite happy with these in general, but they've had to keep to cam belt and water pump schedules to ensure long-term reliability. As an owner, I'm obviously very happy about this next one. The first generation Mazda MX-5, otherwise known as the NA, has very recently started to go up significantly in value. You've got two choices of engines, but for the sake of this video I'll mention the 1.8 litre inline-4, which makes 131 brake horsepower and takes the car to 60 in 8.3 seconds. Now I bought mine in September 2019 for £1,000 in fully working order, without critical rust issues and a need for new rear shocks. Now the minimum you'll find these listed for in a similar state is around £3,500, with £5,000 getting you a pretty reasonable example with around 60,000 miles on the clock. These are well loved little sports cars, and like the Type R, they have a strong cult following. What I've found is that this following is starting to evolve a bit. You have those that buy them to modify them like crazy, those that buy them to turn into track cars, and finally those that buy them to return to original order and run as a classic car. Maybe not so much with the track community, but with the other two uses, the classic status of this car has definitely been cemented over the past few years. As many have died from rust related issues, it's become increasingly difficult to get a good one, and the prices have benefited as such. I really do wonder where prices will will get to on these. As mentioned, rust is the key problem on these, and the main thing to look for when you're in the market for one. Engines are very strong, and many people like to add some form of forced induction into them, which they can also handle. Onto another convertible now, is the first generation Porsche Boxster, with its 2.5 litre flat 6 engine putting out 204 brake horsepower, which gets it from 0 to 60 in 6.7 seconds. These used to be readily available at well under £3,000, but now the minimum you'll find them listed for is £4,000. So for £5,000 you're still looking at pretty high mileage examples. I'd say one of the key reasons for this is simply because of the badge. Classic Porsches have consistently had exceptional values longer term, and if we compare the 986 Boxsters to cars like the 944 and 928, which are also increasing in value as we speak, there's potential for them to continue their rise in value. In addition to this, those fried egg headlights which have started to gain classic status on the 996, 911 are also here on the 986 and have similarly started to grow on people. On top of all of that, it's a seminal car in Porsche's history as a car to open Porsche up to a slightly less wealthy market while still maintaining the Porsche standard of car design and handling. There are many known issues on these, but the 2.5s aren't as renowned for issues as the 3.2 litre block on the S. I would note the replacement parts are relatively expensive on these, so compared to some of the other cars on this list, you might need deeper pockets to actually keep one of these running. Just missing out on the top spot is the Mercedes-Benz SL class, specifically the R129 series. For £5,000 you might just about be able to get yourself into a 320 SL from 1993, which has a 3.2 litre inline 6, putting out 228 brake horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of 8.1 seconds. On release in 1989, it was a technologically advanced, hugely desirable sports car with additional safety features like the automatically raising rollover bar in the event of a crash. Of course, by today's standards it's not technologically advanced, but Mercedes have a habit of making cars that look pretty average and boring after 10 to 15 years and then suddenly flip and start looking like stunning classics that are worth a small fortune. I think that's where this car sits right about now. The SL class in particular is arguably the most famous and seminal series of Mercedes, with the 300 SL, 190 SL and 280 SL being hugely expensive classics today. Though the R129 was the first of the SLs which flipped from having the letters after the numbers to before the numbers, which happened in 1993 to 1995, it still takes its lineage from those classic SLs, and the fact that these have already become pretty scarce in the sub £5,000 range is particularly telling for where prices might actually be going on these, as just a few years ago they were at the absolute bottom of the depreciation curve, well under £5,000. Older examples are better on rust, and generally engines haven't been too bad, but water pumps should be replaced on straight sixes. The auto boxes have also been relatively reasonable, but can of course get jerky over time. Taking the top spot in this video as it only just squeezes in is the Alfa Romeo Spider Type 916, specifically in Lusso spec, which means a 2 litre inline 4 engine, putting out 165 brake horsepower, taking it from 0 to 60 in 8.1 seconds. And by the way, I've organised these cars from least to most expensive to reduce bias on my side, even though I'm a massive Alfa Romeo fan. The Spider is the 2-seater convertible version of the GTV, and in total just 39,000 Spiders were built worldwide. Designed by Pininfarina, the goal was to reinvigorate the sporty coupe category that Alfa had been known for in the past. I don't know about you, but to me this car looks absolutely divine, and on release in 1995 it won 10 awards, including Best Designed Car and World's Most Beautiful Automobile, so clearly some people were in agreement. Of course, the preference would be to have the 3.2 litre V6, but all cars have been going up in value a fair bit even in the last year or so, as they were sitting at around 2 to 3k in April 2020 and are now sitting at around £5,000 for working examples. Owners and journalists alike have praised the build quality on these in comparison to former Alfas, but have also noted they still aren't as solid as their German rivals. The 2 litre twin-spark engine has proven its longevity, assuming it's been well maintained. Original exhausts are also nearing the end of their lives too, so keep some money aside to replace them. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd really appreciate a like. Also, let me know in the comments down below if there's any cars that I've missed at under £5,000. What cars do you think are going to go up in value? As always, a massive thank you to the patrons and to you guys as well for watching. I'll see you in the next one.